We have 23 million South Africans who do not have access to the internet currently. So my ultimate dream goal is for everyone in South Africa to have the same meaningful connectivity regardless of where they are.
Yeah.
$1 million question. Is Starlink coming or not?
So we are very lucky to have the National Minister of Communications and Digital Technology.
Gotcha.
I always get the title wrong.
Same.
Solly Malatsi, who's joining us in the podcast studio today. We're very, very happy to have you here.
Yes.
And I mean, it's been a year. It's been 1 year now of the GNU, but I think it has been a year. How are you feeling?
Just based on that giggle, I think we can end the show right here. There's your answer. Let's go.
It feels like a decade.
I'm sure it does.
It doesn't feel like a year.
So you're two-term minister. Well done.
In 365 days.
Is that why you shave your head so we can't see the grey hair?
Grays.
Listen, my hairline keeps receding, but I think it is receding at a faster pace.
Have you've not lost your sense of humor yet.
No, I need a hair transplant.
Okay. Yeah, you can get that done, you know.
You know, plug me in.
Literally.
But I mean, on a serious note, it's in the beginning, I used to tell everyone who asked me, "Oh, how is the experience?" It's like it felt like being in a high-speed car chase, right? Where you're just like, I just want to get to the next day, but I want to do so much, and you are inundated with, decision making. And there's government is fascinated with things called memos, right? Yeah. So any decision that's presented towards you must be in a memo.
Sure.
So you're always inundated with this, and some of them it's the most, not meaningless because I don't want to.
Just rub it off my head.
No, I don't want to tarnish the thing, but some of the things you're like, this shouldn't be occupying
your time.
My time.
Yeah.
This shouldn't be occupying a minister. I'll give you an example, right? If anyone who travels in the department, and I know traveling is quite sensitive now, is anyone who travels, they must get the minister must sign off that.
At all levels.
At all levels.
All levels. Office
outside of the country. Outside of the country.
Okay.
Right? Even with sponsored trips. So you'll find that a memo is a 7-page memo about Nez is going to a conference in Yemen. It's about digitization, but this is sponsored. So the cost to the department is the allowance, the SNT of 7,500.
And now you've got to read through this.
Now you've read all of that thing. And you come down, you're like, what are the financial implications? 7,500.
And did I just spend 3 hours on a 7,500
and you're like,
document?
these things surely should be at that level, right?
Yeah.
It should be, filtered either a Deputy Director General. That's the other thing about government. There's just so many acronyms, bro.
Yeah.
Like so many acronyms.
Yeah.
Even on things that I was like, can you just say straight? Because you end up being sucked into bureaucratic speak. And that's why people feel a distance from, government when you listen to officials speak.
So let me ask you then. I mean, because in that, very quickly, you've shown us something interesting. When you were obviously a brilliant opposition MP, right? And you tackled government from the opposition benches. Being a minister now, is it what you thought?
No.
Completely.
Why?
No, because what complicates it is with opposition, the approach is you have to win one over your minister, who's your direct opponent, right? Or, the chair of that entity who becomes your direct opponent. So your considerations are minimal, right? In fact, they may be binary. Exposure of wrongdoing or wanting to advance a policy position in the department. When you're a minister, it gets complicated because there are several other considerations that you must make. I mean, I'll give you an example. So early into the appointment, we find out the department brings to my attention that there were 2 board members at one of our entities, which is the Universal Access entity that deals with the distribution of funds for connectivity, postal services, and even broadcasting. So they're like, these 2 board members should have gotten permission from their employers to serve on government boards, which is the standard rule. They didn't have that permission. And I was like, but why was it not dealt with? So natural thing for me is like, okay, I'll write the letter myself.
Yeah.
You know, say, why haven't you done that? At that time, my office is not fully staffed, but I'm like, this is an immediate thing. So you've recommended this, write to them. We write to them, and one of them was the chairperson of the board. She's like, while I understand, and I'll never ever forget that letter. While
It's coming.
While I understand that I should have sought permission, you know, I appeal to the minister's humanity to grant the permission retrospectively.
Oh my goodness.
Your whole humanity.
But you don't need the permission from me. She'd have gone to her employer.
To ask her employer for the
Yeah.
permission.
You know, she should have sought that from her employer. And the oversight on the department's part was not to insist on the production of that evidence.
Yeah.
Right? Because that should be done at the first instance. And for me, it was just one of those instances where I'm like, people become entitled to serving on government boards because they can be lucrative. And you see it in the manner in which, for instance, certain boards meet repeatedly, because those board meetings
It's cash,
are
cash,
board
cash,
fees.
cash.
Because you get paid to go to meetings,
yeah.
basically.
You get paid to go to meetings. And I had a recent example, not to go off a tangent. I had a recent example wherein there was an investigation in one. I was getting a report about an ongoing investigation into one of the entities, right? And the chief investigator says to me during the briefing that one of the things that we find extraordinary, because I've asked why were the cost for that financial year so high? It's like one of the things we find extraordinary is that everyone in that, or most people in that board, they say for meeting preparation, 18 hours. For meeting preparation. Because that is the maximum number of hours you can charge for.
Wow.
So they take the maximum.
18 hours.
So for every meeting, if you had 10
Gee, no.
meetings, the majority of the board said we spent 18 hours preparing for that meeting.
No way.
Listen, if we keep doing this show, we can make a lot of money. though, right?
How many hours has it been?
even for the three of you, right? And you are different individuals with different, you know, intellectual faculties. You don't spend the same amount of time individually
Absolutely.
preparing for this
Yes,
show.
yes, yes,
So
yes.
it
18
can't
hours.
be that you go to the maximum.
No,
Right?
from now onwards, 18 hours, guys.
I tell you what, I'm logging on and I'll leave it there.
Right?
But you see, that's the thing, because technically there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right? Because it says up to a maximum of that. So you have to say people must quantify the exact number and then have an instrument to measure it. So can you see it gets tedious?
It gets extremely
it does.
But
tedious.
then it requires that you must have proper ways in place to say, no, man, this is extraordinary that 6 people on the same entity always charge up to the maximum point.
Yeah. There's almost something wrong with it because that's what
it's not right.
But it's not right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's not right.
And when you've then put things in place for monitoring, for instance, and everyone does their job in the chain, because if everyone does their job in the chain, you start picking up a trend.
Yeah.
That why is the claim always to the maximum level? You then start, you know, realizing it's to maximize the benefits.
Absolutely.
And that becomes wrong because the motivation is not the service to the country and fulfillment of their roles, is to maximizing board earnings.
And how much money?
crazy.
Listen, it takes an hour to just put on the laptop, okay? Right? It takes another hour to pull up the Word document, all right? Because if you're saying
To
you're going to
connect
have
to the Wi-Fi
how do you
and-
quantify it, right?
Yeah.
Because then they have to justify what did they do in those 18 hours
amazing, eh?
to be
But it just
it's
speaks to
also
the West
connected
Stage.
to the
It's
internet.
also like an example, I would say, of, I mean, we were talking about now what you're learning about being a minister in comparison to being on the opposition benches. And I think what you and many of the new ministers in the GNU have encountered is this muscle memory in the department. Like they've been doing it like this for 30 years.
Yeah,
it's always been that way. And now that we've actually got ministers paying attention and reading the full memos and checking the briefings and getting to the end and saying, but hang on, this is not right. There's too much money being spent, or why, you know, any rational person will say nobody prepares for a meeting for 18 hours, you know, in one go.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what we're seeing. Do you think that we're able to kind of upset the system a little bit now as new DA ministers and actually implement some good changes in your department, for example?
No, absolutely. But you raise a very important observation, which is that, you know, the muscle memory informs people's attitude.
Yes, the
right?
culture.
So immediately in the beginning, there were instances where it kind of like, you got the sense that people were uncomfortable with the level of I'd say being hands-on, but it was being meticulous,
Gotcha.
right? Say, okay, memo is being turned back because minister asked 4 questions on it, right? And then people, you then starts kind of like feeling as if there's an, oppositional energy within the department towards the ministry, or they view that. And what I've found useful is setting out a clear vision that people understand, what you want in terms of your priorities. But listen, we also in a unique situation wherein any movement away from any introduction of new things is then perceived to seem. We had this conversation in the portfolio committee meeting where we had revised some of their annual performance plan targets.
Okay.
And the language, I was getting from the ANC guys were like, this is like a deliberate revision and pushback of things committed to in the previous administration. But the reality is we are in a new administration.
Absolutely.
Right? And we are in there to do things differently, right? And to look at where there can be different outcomes. Not informed by the attitude to say, because it was done by the ANC, reverse it. Because some of it worked, some of it was right. But where it doesn't work,
we change.
Yeah. But often I think, especially for those of us who are ministers in portfolios where I think people have a discomfort to be associated with DA ideas, that manifests itself in the policy positions that we choose. So there's kind of like an unease around that when it should be about, okay, as an institution, how do we best support the minister advance the policy objectives that he is seeking, because ultimately the buck stops with ministers, right? And that's what we need to do. And the department then and the bureaucracy becomes a support system for execution and guidance in terms of helping navigate the machinery of the state and getting to do the right decision. And my view is always, for as long as the decision is not illegal, therefore, if we have done everything right, people's own spiritual feelings about whether an idea, connects with them philosophically or not, is not the most important consideration.
Absolutely.
The facts matter.
100%.
Yeah. What was your first day? What was your first cabinet meeting like? Let's end the show right there. That answers the question. And for real,
and what were you feeling emotionally as well? Because
was it in Tainus or was it up in Pretoria? Your first one.
I can't imagine you walking into your first cabinet meeting.
So your first cabinet meeting.
It was definitely in Pretoria. And look, we all get involved in politics with the ultimate ambition that we want to be in government.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's at the highest level.
And when you are in there, that's where, for me, it sank in that the DA is in government and that I'm a minister.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So from in there was just a sense of, this is a massive responsibility.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is a massive responsibility.
Take it seriously,
Yeah, and it's serious work, right?
Absolutely.
And particularly for us from the DA. I mean, we are the first generation of cabinet ministers for the DA.
Yeah.
And I won't use the late themselves in famous words, but can you imagine if this generation then doesn't succeed, the kind of impact that it does
for the future.
Yeah.
For people like myself.
Yeah.
Right?
Who have aspirations of being national government, right? I knew you were going to go there.
I want to make Bonteheuwel a country of its own yet,
So it was also realization that your life has changed.
Of course.
Right? So you can't F it up.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So tell us, Solly, how has your life changed since becoming a minister? It's been a year. How has it changed? Your balance, work, family. Tell us all about it.
So balance is something that you have to really fight for, to get it.
Yeah.
And because there's such a determination to do well, we want to do well, we want to do the right things, we want to make a difference, you can have this fear that if I'm not working, something wrong is going to happen, right? Yeah. At least for me, in the beginning, I lived with that. And because, I've got a young kid, my son is 2 years, 4 months old. I mean, there was this time where, and it was earlier this year, so I was working from home because I was supposed to fly to Cape Town. I was working from home and he walks into the study. He's on Coco Melon, which is something.
Any parent knows Coco Melon.
Which is something that I watch now very religiously, right? And, you know, he has this thing where he's present, but he's so engrossed in it, but he's sitting opposite me. And I was tired and like, you know, I was trying to work and I was like, and then I yawned, right? Yeah. And he's still trying to figure out his language. I'm also trying to figure out his language. So I think in between Sepedi, Tsonga and English, he speaks one of those. And he was like, tired? Like, that's what he expressed. Oh. So I was like, he's asking me if I'm tired.
Yes.
Yeah.
If this kid's exposure to me is my tired version most of the time, something is wrong. And in that moment, I stopped everything and I watched Coco Melon for 45 minutes. And I felt better as a human being.
And you've never put it down again.
Listen, I was going to ask you, Solly, what are you binge watching? Coco Melon.
It would be a real service to the parents of South Africa if
that
you
was the
broadcast
first
it.
time.
Right?
That was the first time I watched Coco Melon uninterrupted for 45 minutes.
Look, you know, it's so true what you're saying. Our families are so critical to our success. If things aren't good at home, don't expect them to be good at work. I ship my family with me to work. You know what I mean? If we're going to go walk out in the rain together, you're going with me because they need to understand what we do and why we do it, because no one understands that we don't work 9 to 5, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's also important for you to be available to your family in the best of your times and for them to also see that, right? Because they deal with the spillover of the difficulties, the anxieties, you know, rough day, you moan, it was rough, it was bad, you went to the portfolio committee, you got clapped there, you know, you're getting negative at life. So you get home, that's all they hear. Then they think, there's just so much negativity about what he's doing.
Correct.
And then the kid, as he grows up, he starts having this negative view of the one thing you love the most because of the energy you transmit in their presence. So it's not right, you know. So you talk about the balance. It is hard. It is hard because, you know, crises emerge and you have to respond to that. But it's also just being intentional, which is something that I've increasingly taught myself to be intentional, to say that now, you know, if I'm going to watch football, I'm going to watch football. After 90 minutes, I'll reconnect with my phone.
I think that's so important, you know, because, for example, with my family, we have Sunday dinners. Every Sunday, we have dinner. I think you were telling me about your Friday dinners.
Night,
and it's those sort of things we have to implement so that we can find a balance. Do you do anything like that?
Yeah. And also it's because, I mean, with these roles also, you now have the unique thing where your homes increase from 1 to 3, you know, as in my case. And I'm grateful now that my family is in Pretoria. But I still have a family home in Polokwane. Because also you must do constituency work and doing there. My thing is when I'm around, to be present, and it's still hard, right? It's still hard, like for instance putting the phone away or being present with your phone around you. So I'm getting used to switching off the phone so that I'm not distracted, particularly when I'm with family, and also when I've dedicated time to friends to say, okay, let's be present.
We can learn
because we forget about friends, right? Because we're so focused on our family life, and if you're somebody like me, my friends have become my family, and so you know you have people. Oh, I haven't seen you for so long. And then you have to sort of divide your time
amongst these people
so that you can see everybody, because relationships are so important to make us full human beings, because it's not just work alone, you know. But Solly, I want to know a little bit more about you. Who are you? Where do you come from and why politics?
As a colleague from here calls me, I'm a world-class villager.
Okay.
So I come from Limpopo, in a village called Radikhali. I was born in Soweto, surprisingly.
Okay.
And in Shawel, I think it used to be your constituency,
yes, it used
if I remember very well. Yeah. Born there, spent the first 6 years of my life, and then moved to Limpopo, which is where my mom comes from.
Okay.
I was raised by my grandparents. Went to primary school and high school in Limpopo, even varsity, went to the University of Limpopo. And yeah, I spent, most of my teenage life, you know, same village, went to the school in the village, village, went to the nearest university in there. So small town fellow, right? All within 17-kilometer radius.
Wow.
He always got accepted. He had no problem. He's in the feeder there, right?
But then was fortunate enough to go to Wits for my honors degree.
Oh, my alma mater.
Yeah, which was the same year I was, and you also went to Wits, which was the same year I was on the Young Leaders program.
Okay.
Yeah. Grew up playing football. Was never good at it. Loved it, but was never good at it. And my sister was the fastest sprinter at home.
Okay.
So always outran by her.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the level of satisfaction that I got when we then went to high school, because our high school athletics wasn't there, so her fitness was low, and I was playing football, right? and we were late, right? My high school principal, guys, was legendary. He was feared. And he had 3 cars, 2 buggies. One was sky blue, another one was maroon, and he had a Prado, right? A white Prado back in the day. If you spotted his car 800 meters in the village, there are 2 main roads towards the school, you can tell that's his vehicle.
It's him coming there.
Listen, I don't care who it was there. Even like the toughest, wannabe gangster in high school, everyone ran to class.
Got you.
Right? So we saw this car approaching close, and we were late.
Oh, no.
And she starts running.
Leaving you behind.
Leaving me behind. She's a sprinter. She's a sprinter. That's her muscle memory, right? She's a sprinter. Of course, her takeoff is fast, right? She outsprints me, and then I try and catch up. My poor sister, she sleeps, she falls.
Oh, no.
But you picked her up.
And I had taken 3 steps to leave her. No. I'd taken 3 steps to leave her. And then I was like, no, man, she's my baby sister. And now she's crying. She's like, Solly. I'm like, Solly. The only time in life where I outrun you, I must go back.
You just can't do it, my friend. You just can't do it.
I went back, helped dust her off, and we're both late. And we then had to choose. Corporal Punishment was real then, and the principal was keen to punish both of us. I was like, no, she got late because of me.
Yeah, you tried to take her on
I'll take both, because she had just fell.
Shame.
She's now bloody dusty. She has to go to class. That's the worst thing can happen to her.
Yeah.
But that guy, I don't know if I can use I don't think we can. It's but I got smashed, bruh. 4 slashes, doubled was now 8. I got to class, bruh. I couldn't sit properly.
Could you explain that smashing or slashing a little bit more, if you don't mind?
Angus is being
No. Get your mind out of the gutter.
It loves in the gutter.
Get your mind out of the gutter. If you were late, you get smashed with a belt.
No, look, dude,
Ena.
I came from the tail end of Corporal Punishment, right? And it was the weirdest thing, because I'd get hiding at school, and where the principal that gave us hiding, he had this horrible trick. He'd put your head beneath the desk.
Oh, my goodness.
And obviously, he'd hit you from the back.
Yeah.
So as he hit you, you'd obviously lift up your head because it hurts like hell, right? And then you'd knock the back of your head.
Sure.
So I'd get that. Then I'd go home, and the neighbor would find out that I'd done something. Then the neighbor would give me a hiding. And then at 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, when my old man gets home, the neighbor tells my father, and by that time he already knows because the school had let him know. They'll get another one just for the fun of it all.
Sure.
Triple punishment.
Lots
Triple
of
punishment.
hidings.
And look how it turned out. It wasn't
Questionable.
But you know what was painful is not experiencing corporal punishment at home and having to suck it up elsewhere.
Yeah.
That for me was the hardest thing. Because it was like, I don't get beaten at home.
Yeah,
And
it's traumatic.
What gives
in a
you
way.
the right to
do it to me here?
do it to me here? But then you accept it because
Exactly.
But I want to touch on something. Sorry. You mentioned football, and I know that you coach. I think it's a youth team or a little league team in Limpopo. You're very passionate about young football clubs, and I know that it's something that's quite dear to you and soft. You've got a soft heart for it. So just share a little bit of that with us.
Look, I wasn't a good footballer. But when you grow up in a village, right, there are 2 things from a sports perspective 2 facilities that you'll always find in many communities. It's a soccer field and netball posts. So if you go to play, right, you're going to end up in one of those,
Yeah.
right? And mostly the boys will go to football and all of that. But I realize now that actually I was made for coaching and not playing, because
Okay.
I was never good in it. But you try and you play. And when I became a member of parliament, because I had left home when I was 21, after leaving the University of Limpopo to go to Wits.
Okay.
Now being a member of parliament from Limpopo, my constituency in there, I get to travel back weekly home. Our village team was defunct, right? Because there was nobody supporting the kids.
Yeah.
And I remember speaking to a friend of mine. I was like, dude, I've got 3 nephews, right? You've got 2. That's half a team together.
Yeah.
If we can get them to be, to be good enough. But they don't have support, because I'd been approached by one of the kids to say, okay, please buy us a soccer ball. And I said, listen, let's start our own team. Because we were tired. We tried supporting the senior team in our village. Community clubs.
Politics.
Community clubs. We tried that thing. We're like, you know what? Let's do our own thing. We started with an under-13 team, and we invested because we had our own nephews in them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's amazing about it, particularly now, we started with these kids in 2016 as a team, is seeing those young men now, grow up. And the kind of men that they are now in their early 20s. I think 3 of the boys, we've lost others as it happens. The core of that team, 5 boys, are still playing in some of our better players. One of them is in the professional setup.
Amazing.
One of them, 3 weeks ago, was coaching now our under-17 team.
Yes,
And he won a trophy. And we're like, you see, that's what we're trying to do, to be there for the kids. Because I believe that every dreamer needs a believer.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And even for me, in terms of the opportunities that I've gotten in life, had there not been someone who, put a bet on me,
Yeah.
Yeah.
regardless of how hard I worked, the reality is you need a support system.
Someone to believe in you, yeah.
Exactly. That drives you, that is there for you, and that cultivates, your ability to keep believing that you can pursue your goals. So that's why I find so much fulfillment in that, being present for those young boys and making them imagine a life beyond the boundaries of my village.
So important. So important, Solly.
What are your dreams for communications?
Sure. As someone who comes from a village, and believe you not, when I enter the entry point of my village, the quality of my connectivity sucks. Right? Excuse the language.
No, please.
And
feel free.
then as you get home, and that's a common story for people in rural areas, in township, and in farming communities. So my ultimate dream goal is for everyone in South Africa to have the same meaningful connectivity regardless of where they are, right?
So important.
Because particularly being in this portfolio, I've come to appreciate and realize how much the power of connectivity unlocks in terms of opportunities.
Absolutely.
Not just for studying, not just for business, but from an aspirational point of view,
Absolutely.
where you are able to interact with people beyond the boundaries of your immediate space.
Yeah.
If you are an entrepreneur, to be able to sell things to markets that were unimaginable to you. And the more I've spent time in this, you start discovering things like, we have 23 million South Africans who do not have access to the internet currently.
Wow.
How many cell phones do we have in South Africa?
The penetration is different based on smartphone penetration, which is at just over 75%, and then you still have the remote control. Yes, what do they call it?
Tamagotchis.
And they were actually called Alcatel gums. That's what
We call it Tamagotchi. Do you guys remember the little Tamagotchi?
I used to sell them. Thanks.
Oh, really?
In Limpopo, we call it Lepopotwane, named after lollipops. So, ice pops, not lollipop. And then, you realize that one of the stats that scared me the most was the majority of internet usage in South Africa is on social media.
Yeah.
True.
Right? That is not a bad thing on its own, but it's not productive use of the internet, because you want to steer it towards learning activities. You want to steer it towards entrepreneurial activities and also online banking. But for all of those things to happen, at the very entry point is access to connectivity.
Yeah.
And then the affordability of smart devices. It's something that I'm truly, truly passionate about, because in this day and age, a device on its own, it's a very basic instrument of us. I bet you the last cent I have, all of us here, the moment we are done with this, the first thing we're going to go is to our cell phone.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I have it right here.
You know,
I'm going to put mine off flight mode.
I'm anxious already to see what's going on. You know what I mean?
Exactly, to reconnect with that.
Correct.
And that is an indicator of how essential it has become, you know, to our daily way of life. So for me, it's about, you know, getting to a stage where they are affordable. And to be much more direct about it, smart devices in South Africa, in our taxation regime, are considered luxury devices.
Yeah.
They carry I'd call it a special tax called the ad valorem tax,
Okay.
right, which contributes to its escalated cost.
Got you.
When you think about it, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the rationale behind it perhaps held water. Right? But the evolution of technology, of new technologies, means that actually a smart device has become a basic instrument of communication. It's not a luxury.
Yeah.
So which is why I'm very proud that, you know, one of the breakthroughs we got was being able to persuade the Treasury, and they had been doing work on it. We did some advocacy to highlight it on the removal of the ad valorem tax on devices below the 2,500 rands.
Yeah, the entry-level stuff.
The entry-level stuff. Because what that does is that removal of the cost then all suddenly opens up to more people. And that's what you want to do, particularly at that level. And
So
we're hoping that, you know, exponentially we can keep rising through the categories so that we you know, there is no barrier to actually getting a decent smart device. We're actually not, you know, advocating for the wholesale removal for the end product, you know, because if you want an end product of 18K or 70K, as there are others in those market, well, that's a different subject.
You know, Solly, I think you make such an important point is around equality and access to basic things like internet connectivity. And I mean, because I use my smartphone for everything, from communicating with family, friends across the world, to research, to watching TV on my phone, to listening to music, navigate. And you know, I sometimes think, what would we have done if there wasn't maps or Google Maps or iPhone? You're joking.
Cape Town's got 3 main roads here, guys. We can't be getting lost in Cape Town. It's got 3 main roads, the N1, N2, and N7.
And that's it.
And the mountain in between.
But then when you go to other parts of the world,
what do you do
then?
No, exactly. And I think, you know, it's so important that and because people don't think about, you know, communications and digital technologies and what it means to bring equality back. Because I think, you know, what you're saying is so important. Everybody should have the opportunity to have a smart device because so much comes from it. You know, like you were speaking, entrepreneurial. I mean, how many people use social media to sell products? How many, you know, people use the internet to be able to meet new people, gain new insights? And I think that's so important. But, Solly, I want to ask you, what on earth is communications and digital technologies?
Yeah, well, it's the interface between how people, you know, talk or interface with the world and to the tools that are available to make that communication possible, which is why the digital technologies element comes in, whether it is, you know, through infrastructure, whether through its devices such as television sets, laptops, computers, in this day and age, wearables, you know, and that's why I've got a whole community of people who are obsessed with the number of steps that they take. That they take a day, but also just new technologies, you know, like AI, you know, ChatGPT, and how those are governed, particularly from a policy making, you know, perspective, because a lot of their work is around, you know, regulation, which means that setting out the terms and conditions in which, you know, mobile network operators do business, broadcasters, you know, are governed, and then, you know, extending into governance in terms of, what are the governance principles that should guide the composition of boards for the state-owned enterprises that are under our disposal,
Like
from
what?
the post office to, the post bank, the SABC, and eCasa, which is the regulator in our space, and also Centec, which is, the signal distributor for the country that enables you to be able, to have television services in those towers.
Yeah. And I also think you have a duty of care as the minister to the risks that the general public are exposed to within the communication space, because, there's so much that you've got like identity theft in the digital space now. You can be exposed to malware or software. I mean, I'm not a techie or anything like that, but there is a lot of risk, I think, associated with the broadcasting space and the communication space as well. And I would think that your department is seized with legislating the protection of South African citizens in that regard as well.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, and those risks, particularly for us politicians, but I guess even for the broader society, are around misinformation, disinformation, the harmful use of AI, for instance, right? And also what has become increasingly important is, data sovereignty in terms of where data is located.
And safety.
And what you put in terms of the firewalls that would prevent, such abuses, because every government has got to safeguard its information, right, and protect it from potential abuses and threats that happen. And one of the most challenging things is that this space is a highly evolving space, because there's always the emergence of new technologies at any given time. And there's often the temptation to say, make a policy for this, make a policy for that, regulate that, regulate that. And the approach, in my view, is you gotta strike the right balance to make sure that at the very basic level, you protect any potential threat to human dignity.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And safeguard that very, very importantly. And then secondly, to minimize any possibility for the abuse of that to, threaten the state, right? And the dangers that it then poses. And then the other elements obviously require, because there was a couple of weeks ago also a debate about, what should be the best instrument of making sure that podcasting as a new industry that emerges is also not a new platform that perpetuates, hate speech, misinformation, and threats to people's dignity. So there's always, that debate was heated, but there's also an appreciation that you can't regulate everything, right?
Yeah.
But you gotta also set basic standards that will ensure that every environment in this space, does not perpetuate negative elements that also threaten our democracy.
It's so interesting, because where do we draw the line between regulating and free speech?
Correct.
Right? Because the DA believes in free speech. And so how far does regulation have to go in order to safeguard free speech, but also fight against hate speech? And I think it's always a very thin line that we have to draw. How far does one go with free speech until it becomes hate speech?
So I always found it funny, whenever you speak to people and you ask them about service, and they'll tell you, no, your document's been sent to Pretoria. Almost as if Pretoria is this huge filing cabinet. Wherever you talk to, people all around. Is government's systems, their own digital and communication systems, up to scratch?
Yeah, good question.
What do you mean up to scratch?
Does it scratch? Does it scratch the surface? Does it scratch the surface?
Look, I think it's not at the level where our country should be.
Yeah.
That's a very honest, response to that, right? And you see that in terms of, the struggles that people always share in terms of accessing government services online, or even trying to do those bookings. And it's something that, particularly with the work that Home Affairs is also doing, but even from our side as the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, working together with the presidency through a newly established unit called the Digital Services Unit, which is driving digital transformation integration across all of government.
Oh, wow.
And what's going to be happening as part of that is the aggregation of all government services into the .gov.za portal,
awesome. Yeah.
so that with a single click you can be able to then access all the government departments in there, but also digital identity,
Yes.
so that you can synchronize all your all your instruments of accessing government services and have one central thing, and also doing digital payments so that it's aggregated. Because if all these services are all aggregated, it makes it seamless and fluid in order for a Nazley or Ryan to navigate government services, and also the history of your interaction with government.
So effectively, you can then of one address, basically one site, you'd be able to pay your car license, log a service-related call in your specific municipality while booking an appointment for Home Affairs.
The aspirational level is that.
Yeah.
Sure,
The
that would be
aspirational
great.
level is to be that. But you'll each have like a digital identity, that may be your ID number or whatever that identity is. And in then accessing those services, it will be able to, direct, your service points that you are then seeking.
Yeah. In Europe, if I'm not mistaken, they have virtual cards.
Estonia,
but they have virtual ID cards. So you don't need necessarily paperwork to go to a Home Affairs. They have a government portal where you can just show, this is my ID, this is all my official documents, and that makes it so much easier to be able to do things. What do you think, Ryan?
No, I think it's great. I know that Leon Schreiber, our Minister of Home Affairs, has been talking about that in particular as it pertains to eVisa, so electronic travel authorizations or documents, where it actually, in the same way that you put your flight ticket on your phone in your wallet, you can actually put your ID or your visa on there as well. And we were just talking about how our phones are becoming everything. And, I think in the future, nobody's going to carry a physical ID card or an ID book. It's all going to be digital. And I think it just goes back to what Solly was saying about when it comes to data protection and identity protection, as we're moving into this digital space, it becomes more important. But I want to really, really jump into the juicy topic here, Solly, because I think it's on the edge of everyone's lips. But let's chat about BEE, because you are the first minister, and this has really sent shockwaves through the political spectrum. You're the first minister. We can't overturn BEE. We don't have the majority in the government, but you have successfully navigated BEE to the point where it's become not an impediment to investment in South Africa through your department, but actually something that is really beneficial to South Africans. And people talk about the equity versus ownership model, and I think we need to just unpack that for the ordinary South African. Let's understand what you've done, because we as the DA, I think people get this myth that we don't support economic redress. We absolutely do. We just don't believe that using race as a determiner for who is a beneficiary of it works. And I think BEE is proof of that. So how was your department, under your leadership, how have you sort of found a way around BEE or actually adapted it to make sure that it actually works?
Look, and even the phrasing around that often worries me, because people think when you find something around it, it's some devious effort, or some
like a trick.
Like a trick, or you're doing something wrong, clandestine, and the reality is that, in very simple terms, if you want to invest in South Africa and you are an international company, there are two ways in which you can do that. You can either take 30% of your business ownership and give it up for local ownership, or you can use the instrument of the equity equivalent investment programs, which says that, one, instead of giving away that 30% ownership, you put away a certain amount towards job creation, towards research and development, towards doing business with local suppliers, towards the specific industry priorities, which in my case would be connectivity and connecting communities. In the mining sector, it might be, the investment in terms of training, engineers, with that regard, and investing in that. That has always been there, right? And I think it's because any conversation, and it's important to note to understand why any debate around economic redress and economic empowerment in South Africa generates the level of emotive response that it does, because ultimately it's about economic justice, right? And our approach is that to have meaningful and broader impact, you have to look at readers in terms of the scale that it can have in touching and filtering down ordinary people's lives, instead of a few individuals prescribed only to ownership.
Benefit, So important.
So what I basically did was, when we looked in terms of the policy environment in the space and regulations, because funny enough, one of the things that the president himself even said at the very beginning of the GNU, and he keeps repeating it at different intervals, is that we have to constantly look at regulations in our space and say, how can we approach regulations differently where there are obstacles to investment, where there are obstacles to job creation, where there are obstacles to uplifting communities, and find ways and instruments that will help us achieve broader results. And that's why the statement of intent has at the heart one of its goals, inclusive growth and job creation. So for me, I noticed that in my department, in our sector, the issue of 30% local ownership is restricted only in the telecommunication space, right? When it comes to the issuing of individual licenses, right? And I said, if we're talking about consistency, right, and what is called regulatory parity in our lexicon, which is about making sure that the same rules apply to the same people, then this is a very odd development.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. Because it is only in the telecommunications sector that you can't enter invest in South Africa through the equity equivalent programs, which gives you broader, and that's why I think, in its phrasing, it was faced as a direct result of the broad-based black economic empowerment, right? Because there was a recognition that you have to find other instruments. And it was basically about doing that, because the reality is that there will be foreign investors who, based on their ownership structure, may not want to change their ownership.
Absolutely.
And our law makes provision for that. But according to some people, you must just say, well,
30% or nothing.
Leave.
Or nothing. Or leave.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. Sorry to interject you. Here's the other thing. There is still very, very stringent requirements, right, that ought to be satisfied before a successful equity equivalent program, can go ahead. So it's not to say that, simply because you prefer that venture, then, okay, there won't be any, interrogation or any imposition of various things that you still need to satisfy. And I think the debate around it has been expediently been used to say, okay, this is an attempt by a DA minister, to reverse, the legacy of
anti-revolutionary
and all of that. Because that sentiment
again.
But because we know politically that sentiment resonates with the base.
With that little
Right.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
Because your dream is for communication to your village. Your village, which like many other places, suffer the same.
To the 20... No. You're going to be accused of nepotism.
Let's not
Not
to villages such as your own.
No. To the 23 million South Africans who are connected.
But now okay, fine. That's the dream.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
$1 million question. Is Starlink coming or not?
Well, Starlink will still, if they want to come to South Africa, they must still go through the process of applying for a license in South Africa. And I know this topic, irritates a lot of people.
It does. Me too.
They get very, very, very excited. You don't make regulations for one individual.
Absolutely.
It has to be uniform. Yeah.
It has to be uniform for everyone.
Yeah.
Right? And they, like any other company, must go through that process. Right?
Good.
what my initiative for is to say that let's open both doors of the 30% local ownership and the equity equivalent, and that they are available at all times, and that the choice must permanently be available to everyone. Whether you are friends in the UIA, as an example, may want to enter South Africa through a different venture, that be the case. The conversation that underlies your question is the fact that in terms of options for connectivity, the reality is that satellites are one of those instruments, right? So for me, I am not obsessed, and quite frankly, I care less where the source of the satellites comes from. If it comes from Asia, if it comes from Europe, if it comes from Scandinavia,
what we need.
As long as it's offering a solution that can help us get communities connected, that's great. What then needs to happen is, in doing so, like any other operator, they must then be scrutinized on their conditions. Because what our regulator does, which is ICASA, even after they've granted you a license, or as part of the conditions to grant you a license, they can outline whatever do's and don'ts, so that if you violate those, then you are out, right? And that is dependent on each and every application that they do.
I think that's so important, Solly, because it must be uniform for everybody. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, it's the same rules for everybody. And you know, once we start looking outside of that, it becomes a little bit murky, because now you're making rules for certain people. And I think keeping it uniform is the best way to go. But I'll tell you, I'll be straight up honest with you. I'm not so sure about Starlink. You know, I have a little bit of my doubts, you know, a little bit of trust issues when it comes to that. But hearing you speak and saying everybody has to go through the same process makes me feel it puts me a little bit at ease.
And that's why, like I always say, this conversation gets contaminated by the permanent reference to one company. Take away, you know, the name of the company. Focus on, in this space, in terms of new technologies, right? Because low orbit Earth satellites, you know, 10 years ago were not an emerging well, maybe 2 decades ago, an emerging instrument of connectivity. Now they are. So we have to look at, okay, in terms of, you know, our legislation, in terms of our regulations, how do we respond, right, timelessly and appropriately to the emergence of new technologies. If it is Nazley, satellites, or whatever.
Thanks for the idea.
You know,
if this job doesn't pan out,
you're going to do satellites.
We're going to do satellites.
Here we go.
It must emerge through that. And the concerns around, and that's why we have a regulator, the concerns around, you know, data sovereignty, about whatever operational conduct that may come. The discretion is ultimately with the regulator, you know, and it can set out very, very clearly those. But I'm saying that we shouldn't have a fear of choice when it is provided for in law.
I agree.
And it is already practiced in other
Therein is the game changer, absolutely. I mean, so I work in the foreign affairs space, and we deal with foreign direct investment, with companies who want to come and invest in South Africa. And BEE has always been like this brick wall that they come up against. And I think a lot of companies have said we don't not want to contribute to South Africa outside of just investment. We want to be committed to skills development and training, long-term investments. But I think a lot of investors look at South Africa and they say, whoa, under the ANC, there's just been tons of corruption through BEE. Based purely on the ownership model. And companies say, well, who am I giving part of the ownership of my company to? What are they going to do with my company? Is this feasible for us in the long run? Whereas now I think they are re-energized to enter South Africa as investors, because they're saying, well, hang on, this minister's done something pioneering, not by reinventing the wheel, but actually broadening the interpretation of the regulation and saying, well, you don't just have to give ownership of your company away. You can invest in other ways. As Solly said, you can train sector-specific individuals, or you can provide, you know, mechanisms for us to actually get off the ground. And that, I think, is a big game changer, because it signals to the international community that this brick wall has some sort of cracks in it, you know, that are beneficial to us.
And I think,
I agree.
I think this is simply put and the way you explained it now is the first time I understand it in that way. And if we just quickly think about it, BEE is a failure not from a policy point of view, but from an implementation of it all. Because what has BEE really done? It's really just benefited that select few. Whereas the other option, which you've now explained, which I now understand so much better, has the real ability to change people's lives completely down the chain.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? By upskilling, creating more opportunities, economically developing.
Yeah.
And so it's something that we should really be driving and pushing. And I think that's brilliant work that you've done, that you see it that way.
And the most important thing, it is that it is provided for in law.
That's the thing.
So it's not a new invention or something. And guys,
you've not changed nothing. It's just been all the time.
Like it's also the emphasis to say that there is a broader scope and an approach to how empowerment can be done.
Absolutely.
And this provides that opportunity, right? I mean, if you look at the level of investment that Microsoft has done in this country, right, and they've done it through an equity equivalent investment program. Earlier this year, they announced, a 1.2 billion investment in the country. That is massive, right? If equity equivalent programs were not applicable, that investment would have gone elsewhere.
Yeah.
In that space. So why do you have this selective application in, other aspects of the very same sector? It is very odd.
But I'm going to disagree with Angus there, because I actually don't think that it's the implementation of BE. I think that the core of the policy itself is incorrect, because it's focusing on the wrong beneficiaries, as we said earlier. We don't have the majority to change the law yet, so we have to work with what we've got. Fine. But if we could, you could have an economic redress policy, which is our economic justice policy, which focuses on poverty rather than race. So you're saying, cool, we need to uplift these particular people in this community using this particular department or using this skill. And I think that Solly is you've given so much hope to the country around how economic redress can work, and that it can be beneficial for the ordinary person on the ground as opposed to the politically connected or the politically neat. But I think let's talk about the successes in your department outside of the BEE question. What have been the short-term successes, the low-hanging fruit that you've managed to really pick and make the most of?
I mean, one of those has been the removal of the ad valorem tax on the smart devices.
Yes, that's a good one.
Smart devices issue. This work on the policy regulation, we started working on it late last year. Not late last year, it was towards October. And this is a very important thing, because to go back to your very first question, as an opposition MP, who do you have to consult when you do things? Have an idea, and if you've had enough experience from a political communications perspective, you know how to navigate the instruments of Parliament to drive an issue, right? Because it's about maximizing the coverage and then having the impact. In here, because you also don't want to lead in isolation, because that is also risky on its own. You must be consultative in the process to showcase that there is no ill intention towards anything, right? Because the thing with executive power also is it can plant in the idea, and you can instance that, it is only your prerogative, and then, just do it and then proceed. But you have to take your institution along, which is your department. You have to take also your regulator along, and also the sector. And this is why, I consider that a success to get it over the line, because I know the level of discomfort that institutionally, it received. Because people had this fear about this debate that has erupted over it. And another success has been, empowering government departments to equally have the freedom, or the choice to procure their ICT services outside of the South African State Information Technology Agency, which is SITA, which is the body that established that for, national governments, provincial administrations that need to procure, technology services, they must go through that institution. And I'm sure our constituencies, in your constituencies, you have heard of this concept offline. The system is offline.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
It's the South
That is
African
the
proverb.
worst thing ever. The system is offline.
Load shedding in Pretoria.
Oh
The
my
filing cabinet is
goodness.
down.
Right. So a lot of government departments have been expressing their frustration with the inefficiencies that they've encountered in terms of their technological solutions that are prescribed by having to get them from this one source, right?
Yeah.
And there's been numerous efforts in past years to seek exemptions because departments can apply to a minister and say, hey, give us the permission to do this. But we know exemptions cause a lot of problems, right? Because they can be subjective, even though they are prescribed by in law, and they can cause inequality and inconsistent application and consideration of those. So we also spent a lot of time working on the regulation to give the department that choice. But in order to get to that choice, they must, because the law, as you say, Ryan, we must work with what we have. The law requires that you must start with CTA. Right?
Yeah.
So the department was approached it and said, okay, these are our needs that we have. We want to have, a dashboard of monitoring, our asset register or having our asset register digitized. You go to CTA and say, this is the solution that we want. CTA may come back and say, in order for us to deliver this is the cost that you need. And it still goes to market, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what frustrated the department because there has been instances where saying, but we can get this cheaper elsewhere at a quicker time around because sometimes cheap is not good.
Exactly.
Sometimes cheap doesn't guarantee you quality.
The best,
It gives you affordability but not quality, right? And you want both. You want, affordability and you want
the best
quality.
possible price,
Exactly. And also you want market competitive prices so that at the very least you can juxtapose with something. And that is done to enable departments, right? And it's been also one of the things that the opponents of this move have incorrectly, characterized it as an attempt to emasculate that institution. And it is not. Because there will be instances wherein that institution on its own does not have the capabilities to meet the needs of the respective department. Right? And the department must have, and guys, at the root of our democracy is the ability to have choice.
Absolutely.
Absolutely agree.
Nothing else like choice. So Ryan asked you about low-hanging fruits and things that, you're very proud of. I want to ask you, you walked into that department. What were some of the things you found that you didn't like, that you knew this needs to change?
Yeah, it's also just, one, accountability. And accountability basically means, different people at different layers taking ownership of, their actions. And we're still working on that. And also from the department because, our mandate is huge. And we've got 11 entities.
Wow.
And just also making sure that there is standardization in terms of approach, how you approach, for instance, the issue of board compositions, board reporting, because ultimately, we are accountable for what happens at the post bank. We are accountable for what happens at the post office. We are accountable for what happens at the SABC. Even at ICASA, even though they've got boards, they've got, management teams that are in there. Exactly. And for us to be able to one, provide the support, the vision, but also to do the oversight, right? To make sure that, the right things happen. And one of the things which often doesn't, meet the narrative of, people who haven't been in government is that we also have a decent group of civil servants.
We do.
Absolutely.
We do.
They're not all what.
We do.
Many are invisible. Many may be disillusioned because, they've only ever experienced one party state, right? And many, are anxious or were anxious in the beginning because of, the fear of what change would look like, you know. And I think they were also just hyperventilated sense of, once the ministers get in here, they'll get rid of everyone.
Fire everybody.
Yeah, so there was that mistrust, you know. And generally it's about just make time to know people, set out your clear vision.
Yeah.
There will be people who don't agree with it.
Absolutely.
There will be people who try to even sabotage.
Yeah.
What's that vision? Where do you want to see the Department of Communications and Digital Technology at the end of this term?
At the end of this term, and I'll take it back to the beginning, for me, those 23 million South Africans who are not connected keep me awake at night.
Okay.
You know, I don't want to travel to any part of the country at any given stage and be disconnected to the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's, not fair.
Yeah.
And it cheats people of what, in my view, is a basic right, to human dignity. Mm-hmm. It is also making sure that, in terms of access, that access may be the same throughout the country. Mm-hmm. And that the instruments to communicate, which is the smart devices, are affordable and they don't price people out of that.
Yeah.
Right? And then to ultimately get to enjoying the ability of having access to government services online, and that they are reliable. And you don't have to go digital, but then end up doing the same manual things
exactly
that you did. And that's why when you were speaking earlier about, I can't wait for the day that we'll be able to use a digital identity to board a flight.
Absolutely.
Because I actually don't get why you can produce a digital boarding pass,
but not a digital
ID. Yeah. But Solly, can I add to that list?
Yeah.
Data prices, my man.
Yeah, I don't want to go there.
Crazy. I mean, how much gigs of data? I mean, we're talking fiber, we're talking prepaid data. It's expensive, and a lot of people just simply can't afford to buy 2-3 gigs to be able to connect.
No, absolutely, and it's a very important topic and conversation, because connectivity, your device are meaningless if you
don't have
data.
The instrument, right? And you can't have it, for the time which gives you value of use.
Correct.
Right? So
night owl.
Yeah, and 90% of the population during that time, there's no way.
Exactly.
We're sleeping, bro.
I was going to say, us politicians are actually awake that time.
Yeah, we're sleeping,
but it's a very serious topic, and I think we have to look at one, the policies in place currently, which enables that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And my thing is always, how do we best empower the customer, right, to have maximum benefit, right, and then to have the choice to afford it. I think the sentiment that the public says, and this is something that we're grappling with, right, because it can also be like, it can seem knee-jerk to say slash all the prices, right, in order to get to a decision. Have to understand what are the drive factors that do that, and then deal with them. And which is why the connectivity issue for me is dear, because the more you are able, either through government's own intentions to connect public facilities, right, people's access to there becomes either through, broadband connectivity, through the public Wi-Fi spots, which then ultimately drive the cost. So all of these things are related from a policy level, from the mobile network operators also enhancing their investment in all the different areas, and then having the fundamental question ultimately, which the regulator must then be able to resolve with guidance, is it fair to pay for something and then end up losing it because you didn't use it in a specific
No, it's
period
not
of time.
fair.
And the carryover.
No, it's not fair.
And the
it should be carried over because we're paying proper money for these things. Solly, we know we don't have you for forever because we could sit here and chat for hours.
Not very few people can say that.
But I wanted to ask you, just to go a little bit personal, what is one thing that you wish people knew about you?
But then if I say it, they'll all know it.
No, exactly. Exactly. So tell us something that we know that we want to know.
We make your wish come through.
I don't think a lot of people will believe that I've got more than 4 tattoos.
Oh, only?
Do you mind showing us?
Parental guidance.
Where are they?
Age restriction for viewers.
You talk about age restriction, and in your department, I remember a few years ago, I don't know if they still have it, but there used to be the film review board.
Yeah, it's now called the Films and Publications Board.
Yeah, so they get these people, it's the various stakeholders, and generally they're like pastors and religious people, whatever. Because that I remember that one, and these pastors would have to watch these movies, whether they were adulterated movies or just normal movies, and they'd be able to work out, is this good for consumption in South Africa and what the age restriction should be.
My goodness.
So maybe we should get ourselves onto one of those boards.
Wait, but Solly, you say you have more than 4 tattoos.
Yeah.
Is that what you wish people wants to know about you?
That's what I can think of. That's the most honest answer.
I'll tell you, that's not a lot. I stopped counting how many tattoos I have. So next time you want to get another, holler at me and we can go together. Because I want to do my hand. I want to fill up my hand because it's a bit empty when I look at it.
Tattoos.
Ryan, do you have any tattoos?
In
Ryan?
the famous words of Kim Kardashian, you would never put a bumper sticker on a Bentley.
Mr. Bentley.
We just metro buses out here.
Well, there you have it. From now knowing that Solly's got 4 tattoos to knowing that my good friend Ryan here has a Bentley and that you want to fill your hand. We'd like to know what you, the viewer, seems to think about all of this. Please drop your comments in the comment section down below. Phone us. Solly's the head of communication, so you'll find yourself a number as well. But Solly,
the call won't be dropped.
The call won't be dropped. Solly,
There's no connection.
you're an absolute legend. I think South Africa in its entirety supports your vision of connecting 23 million people that need that connectivity.
Absolutely.
And it's not just for WhatsApp, but it's for a whole lot more to really take this country to another level. Well done, Solly. You're
Absolutely.
a legend.
Thank you for joining us, Solly.
Thank you. And I'm glad I'm not seeing you on Facebook videos and I get to be in the same studio as you. Keep the good work you're doing with your activism.
All of us together, my friend.
Yeah.
And we're heading in the right
Dala.
direction.
Let's Dala.
Dala what you must
Dala.
do.
Ba, 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 ba.